Okay, let's just jump right in. I want you to imagine a scenario that the sources we looked at laid out pretty clearly. A computer that can solve a problem, say a complex molecular model that holds up drug research for months and it solves it in, what, 3 seconds. That's not a hypothetical anymore.
Not at all. And that speed, that gap isn't just an improvement, it's a fundamental leap. We're moving from classical computing, which is all ones and zeros, to the quantum world, which uses the weird and wonderful rules of nature itself to do the math.
And for decades, quantum computing has been that ultimate promise, always just around the corner. So our mission today is a deep dive into why, as we're looking at 2026, it seems that corner has finally actually been turned. We're moving from that era of quantum supremacy experiments into the real-world era of utility.
That's the key word, utility.
Exactly. And we have to look at both sides of it. The incredible medical miracles this could unlock, but also the huge security threat Q-Day that's forcing everyone to change how they operate right now.
Yeah, the sources make it really clear the whole focus has shifted. The race to just prove these machines can work is basically over. Now it's a race for application, for building the infrastructure, and maybe most critically, for digital defense. 2026 is really shaping up to be the year of that transition.
So let's start there with the utility. What was the big engineering barrier that held this all back for so long? Why couldn't we get those incredible calculations to actually, finish?
It all really boils down to one concept: decoherence.
Decoherence.
Yeah. I mean, think about our classical computer bits, the zeros and ones. They're incredibly robust, very stable. But quantum bits, or qubits, they exist in this fragile state called superposition. They're both 0 and 1 at the same time. That's where the power comes from, but it's also the weakness.
Right, because any little interference, a tiny vibration, a shift in temperature, it just causes the whole thing to collapse back into a normal 0 or 1.
And your calculation is instantly ruined. It's like you used this analogy before, trying to walk a tightrope in a hurricane to run a marathon.
Exactly, it's just too unstable. So for these calculations to become useful, for them to have utility, you need a machine that's fault tolerant.
It has to be stable long enough for the algorithm to actually run to completion.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the real breakthrough we're seeing from places like IBM Quantum and Google Quantum AI. It's all about error correction and the idea of logical qubits.
Okay, so how did that one solution completely change the timeline for getting useful answers?
It was a total inflection point. Instead of trying to make a single physical qubit perfectly stable, which, physics tells us is nearly impossible, they figured out how to bundle them. They grouped dozens, sometimes hundreds, of these unstable physical qubits together.
So they work as a team, essentially.
Exactly. They use the collective behavior of the group to stabilize the information. This whole bundle acts as one single, highly reliable logical qubit. So if one little physical qubit in the group decoheres, its neighbors can detect that error and correct it within the logical structure.
Ah, okay. So that pushes the error rate way down and gives you enough stability to finally run something complex.
And that's why we're past just lab demonstrations. Now, companies are actually renting access to these machines to solve real industry-scale problems.
And when we talk about real-world problems, the sources, they paint an almost unbelievable picture for medicine. They keep saying quantum computers speak the language of nature. What does that actually mean for developing a new drug?
It's fascinating. The thing is, molecules, atoms, all their interactions, they already operate according to the rules of quantum mechanics. Our classical supercomputers, they're built on binary logic. They can only ever approximate that behavior. It's like trying to describe a symphony using only 2 notes.
Which explains why drug discovery is this decade-long process of just trial and error in a lab. The computers can't truly model what's happening.
Right. But a quantum computer can run a full 4D simulation of those molecular structures right down to the subatomic level. It doesn't need to approximate. And the sources show that in late 2025, companies like IonQ and Quantinuum already showed they could do chemical simulations that were measurably better than the best classical methods.
Can you give us a concrete example? What kind of problem are they tackling now that was impossible before?
A huge one is simulating metalloenzymes, or these really complex protein-ligand interactions. These are absolutely critical for understanding diseases like Alzheimer's or certain cancers, where the way a drug docks with a protein is incredibly specific.
And trying to simulate that on a normal supercomputer would take
thousands of years, literally. With quantum, researchers can now predict how a new compound is going to behave in the body before they even start the traditional lab tests.
So the timeline isn't just getting shorter, it's collapsing. We're talking about taking the development for a vaccine or a treatment from a decade down to potentially just a few months. That's a different world.
It's a complete revolution in computational chemistry, and the economic impact is just staggering. You save billions in R&D, you get effective drugs to market so much faster.
It's an incredible, undeniable miracle. But the sources are just as loud about the other side of this. This is a dual-use technology. So if the good guys are moving this fast, we have to assume the bad guys are too. Let's talk about the shadow this whole thing casts.
We absolutely have to, and that brings us to the really urgent security threat, which is known as Q-Day.
Q-Day. So that's the moment when an adversary gets their hands on a fault-tolerant quantum computer.
And can run something called Shor's algorithm.
Right. And Shor's algorithm is the quantum recipe for cracking the math problem that underpins almost all of our modern encryption, right? RSA encryption, the thing protecting your bank account, government secrets, everything.
Precisely. The moment Shor's algorithm can run reliably, the lock on our digital world basically dissolves. But here's the critical point for 2026. The threat isn't in the future. It's already here.
Because of this concept, harvest now, decrypt later, this is the part that I think is the most immediate risk.
Yeah.
Can you just break down how that works?
Sure. State actors, sophisticated hackers, they know that most of today's sensitive data only needs to be secret for, say, 5, 10, 20 years. Think about things like diplomatic cables, new patents, military tech designs. They're stealing huge volumes of this encrypted data today.
So they're grabbing the locked safe even though they don't have the key?
Exactly. They just store it, they hoard it. Then, whenever Q-Day happens and they get access to a powerful quantum computer, they can go back and unlock that entire archive instantly. This means if your data needs to stay secret for more than a few years and is protected by classical encryption, you have to assume it's already been compromised.
Wow. That completely reframes the problem. It makes the transition to post-quantum cryptography, PQC, not just a good idea, but a global emergency.
It's a race for digital survival, and we're seeing the big players move. The sources show that Google Chrome, Mozilla, OpenSSH, they're all actively integrating these new NIST-approved PQC algorithms into their products. And get this, organizations are now being told to dedicate over 5% of their entire IT security budget just to quantum readiness.
5%. That is a massive number for a threat that many people still think of as science fiction.
It shows you how real the C-suites and government agencies are taking the harvest now threat. It's not hypothetical anymore. The money is moving.
Okay, so the urgency is clear. And it's being driven by the players who are actually building this new ecosystem. Let's talk about the different technologies they're using to get there.
Right, because it's not just one type of machine. There are a few competing designs. On one side, you have the big players, IBM and Google, with their superconducting models. Very powerful, but they need these massive, expensive cryogenic coolers. We're talking temperatures near absolute zero.
So they're limited to these huge specialized facilities, not something you can just put in your average data center.
Exactly. But then you have these other technologies, like the trapped ion systems from IonQ or the neutral atom approach from atom computing. And this is where things get really interesting for accessibility. They still need cooling, but it's much less extreme. They can operate at higher temperatures, relatively speaking.
And what does that mean in practical terms for the rest of us?
It means we're starting to see quantum computers that are powerful enough to be useful, but also small enough that they could eventually be put into existing local data centers. This is what really accelerates the creation of a quantum cloud.
The quantum cloud. So most companies won't own a quantum computer. They'll just rent time on one. What are they renting it for right now that proves this utility phase is real?
We're seeing huge gains in optimization and financial modeling, especially with this convergence of quantum and AI. You have companies like JP Chase using these quantum classical hybrid systems. They're using platforms like NVIDIA's Q2Q to just supercharge their AI models for things like financial forecasting.
So the quantum processor does the really hard part of the calculation and then feeds that result to a classical AI model to finish the job.
Exactly. And we have real numbers on this. The sources point to HSBC using IBM's Heron processor and improving their bond trading predictions by over 30%. That's a real measurable ROI. That's utility.
And it's happening at the national level, too. This is being treated as a strategic technology, not just a commercial one.
Oh, absolutely. Look at Canada's $334 million Quantum Champions program from late 2025. That's not just for university research, it's industrial policy. It's designed to anchor talent and build the infrastructure to make sure they dominate in the quantum economy. The message to both countries and companies is simple. Act now, or you will fall behind.
So what does this all mean? We've gone through the sources, and we've seen these two incredibly powerful, almost contradictory stories that are both coming to a head in 2026.
On one hand, yes, we are standing on the edge of a revolution. We can use the fundamental physics of the universe to solve problems we once thought were impossible. We could literally create algorithms to cure diseases that have been with us for centuries.
And yet that exact same power, that same speed, represents a kind of digital doomsday clock. Every secret, every financial record, every bit of national security data protected by old encryption is now living on borrowed time. The machine is both the ultimate creator and the ultimate destroyer.
The conclusion from all the material is just. It's unequivocal. Quantum computing is no longer a technology you just watch. It's here. It's scaling. And it is the defining disruptive technology of the late 2020s. It demands urgent action on security, while at the same time, it should inspire just immense optimism for what we can build.
And that really leaves us with a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to sort of wrestle with. As you take all this in, the speed, the promise, the danger, where does your focus land? Are you more focused on leveraging the incredible breakthroughs in medicine and finance? Or are you prioritizing that 5% budget, that complex but mandatory shift to post-quantum cryptography to ensure your digital survival? Because that line right there between innovation and defense is where the next decade will be won or lost.